God bless. This is Anthony DiBello. It's June 29th at the end of the month, basically, 2025. Father God, please bless this message. Let it be your work and will. Amen. So as I begin what I call a life update, this is the fourth. I hope to keep it to an hour or so, unedited, with no photographic inserts, although they can be found on my social media and website, or that I possess them, with regards to what I would call evidence and records, and what I'm to record about the life of my daddy and me and our victimization is the truth. I'll put my hand to God and swear an oath of that. I'll, go to a lie detector test. I'll take one of those. Anybody who knew me or knew my dad or knows me knows when it comes to my daddy, I tell the truth. Even when it comes to my mommy, I tell the truth. So I'm going to just give a little bit of background, maybe some recent events, and then projecting some current events with regards to the life of my dad and me. So briefly again, my daddy started with nothing but through his belief in God and his love of his wife Dorothy, and her love of God and love of my dad. I was their firstborn child, a son, blessed to be a man, and blessed to be I was my mom's favorite, and by the end of his days, I was my daddy's favorite, and I loved them more than anything on earth, even more than myself. I just don't, I won't get into it, but I just would, in many ways, I would rather chase them or follow or look for them into eternity than to be here on earth with the evil, sinful, ungodly people that, I know, and the way they've treated me, and even the ones I don't know. So I'm going to keep this message, again, a life update about my dad. I am coming out with a video, I think, probably on July 1st, which is going to be less, personal, more professional in a sense, for broadcast or, distribution. I don't know how many people will read it. I'm leaving this, again, for the record, in case something, devilish and destructive happens to me, knowing that the devil's a liar, a thief, and a destroyer. He wants death, and he has one person on this earth, and particularly and her followers, and particularly working toward the death of my dad and the dishonor of my mom and him, and trying to do, and has done the same to me in many ways, destruction-wise, and through lying and thievery. And if you read the scriptures, that's really, at least from the Christian perspective, but I believe every religion would know this, that Satan is a liar, a thief, and a destroyer. So having said that, the background is, again, that my daddy, through belief in God and meeting my mom and hard work and love of life, joy, and peace, quote unquote, had everything until my mom died, October 17, 1982, at which point Satan picked this one female to attack my dad and his family. My dad called her a pig whore bitch simply because of what she did toward him, which was to use him for his money. As soon as she met him, she started using him. She, under false pretenses, according to my dad, called herself a Christian, least Christian person I've ever known. used him to get space at his office to hold a quote-unquote Bible study, which my dad said was a whole ruse. Immediately she got hired as my dad's secretary and worked with my dad and his second child, son, who has through the years become, atheistic and ungodly and is just almost not nearly as evil as this person, but just an evil person. And I've said on the other messages 90%, 10%, sort of, even if it's as an expression, things happen 90% of the time, 10% of the time. 5 times in the last 30 years he helped me, which I'm grateful for. But out of 50 experiences with him or interactions, I've had 5 good ones and 45 negatives. So 50%. I'm sorry, 90% negative. And her, she's 99% evil. I don't recall any good she did for me. Maybe one thing out of 100, per 100. And so when my, dad met her, she was like 29, he was 50, 51. So she's like 21 years younger than him. And I saw the decrepit place she lived in, Rensselaer. It looked like a kind of a slum type of place. And my dad pulled up in his Cadillac. I was in the back seat. I'm like, Dad, why do you think she's with you? She's with you for money. It's classic as old as, tale as old as time. Gold digger is what they call them. And I warned him. Everything I said throughout the years and 3.5 decades they were together, came true. And I told him, I said, Daddy, you're going to lose everything. And she made sure of it. And so, she started immediately making money off of him. And I've even made a couple notes I'll refer to, but one of the top notes here, and I'll go back to the last message I left, and this doesn't pertain to the Hall of Fame in my high school, which rejected me this year, maybe 2 years in a row. And somebody had written me anonymously, this cowardly, evil person, untruthful, saying, I had this arrest record. So I've mentioned a couple of my arrests. So I'm going to, and I've had negative interactions with the police who, like I said, 90% of the time, they're evil. And so I mentioned a couple of them. I'm going to mention other ones just for the record, because I'm also going to give, in case something happens to me again, or as a deposition, or, because, and I'll go get to the arrests and these stories with her that I overheard that I don't have all on recording. Some I do, and some I don't, and I'll get to that. But my life of my dad, he was very godly to me, very Christ-like. And he died, was basically pulled in from an ambulance with 24 hours left in his life on Holy Saturday, or, during the time in the Christian and Catholic faith that Jesus was dying on the cross. And, was reported to arise on Easter. Now, whether you believe Jesus is the Son of God or just a great wise prophet, in some cases both, he was certainly victimized. He didn't deserve to be crucified. He wasn't a threat to anybody but the evil people who thought, wrongly about him, and then certainly the government who felt threatened. So, like, this person used the government to keep my dad and I apart and to not protect my father, just to make sure she could profit from him. And certainly doesn't care who she, murdered along the way, or murdered their spirit, or physically threatened, or had falsely accused and arrested like she did me. And my dad was, in a sense, crucified. He should still be alive today. I know that in my heart. God and I both know that. But if you, look at the circumstances, both spiritually and, pragmatically or physically, and you can go, I'm going to include a link here, and you can see the AI, or artificial intelligence report on the death of my daddy. How, when he was brought into the hospital, and I've tried to get these records, but again, it's all a lot of women involved in, not to be overly political, but blue Democrat, female, minority-run New York State women. The woman at the ambulance company, I couldn't get the record, And it's amazing how a person who knew my father 35 years and used and abused him, but stole his last name, and I, who had it from birth at 63, I have less rights to my dad's records than she does. And was doing nothing but trying to save him, which he wanted to be saved. And, I spent my money to take care of him. She took his money to not take care of him. Took my money, took, in some cases, Joseph's money. I mean, money from Bingo City, which is a video I recently put up. I mean, according to my dad, which landed him a felony, but I can't find any record, and everybody I have to deal with in New York, from that evil governor down to the attorney general, down to the family court judge. I mean, woke, female, Democrat, evil, ungodly women. So it's just the nature of it. Prayerfully, again, without being too political, under this new presidential administration, hopefully more godly men get in there, more Republicans, if that's their political party. Again, 9 out of 10. I'd handle for that 1/10 of one good Democrat out of 10. But again, it's just very difficult in New York and even through the country, but mostly in New York, where he was basically, had this this injury. Now, according to the AI report, she could have let him languish for a week before an ambulance was called and he was rushed into the hospital. But again, I use that Jesus-like comparison. Certainly, I'm not Jesus, nor is my dad, but he was my God on earth in a lot of ways, beside the God. And I studied and, followed Christianity for decades and worshiped God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. But he suffered the same way, and was betrayed not only by like one Judas like Jesus was. He had 7 other Judases, all his other children, that would rather believe and follow and support her than my daddy or me, simply me, because they just have, I don't say this like derangement syndrome thing, because that's kind of, a misnomer, but just such hatred and deceit of, despise of me, that they were like, as long as it's not Mark, as long as it doesn't benefit or profit Mark, then we're fine. And I don't just mean financially. I just mean that, my daddy and I just wanted to be together. He wanted to be saved. He wanted to be happy, have love, life, joy, and peace at the end of his days. He knew if he was left alone with her, he's left messages, she was going to hurt him. And so anyway, so having said that, again, the ambulance gets called. He's in the hospital. Within 24 hours, he's gone. And, and I say crucified in a sense, because he had been beaten. First, he was financially abused. He was mentally abused. He was emotionally abused. He was held in this cult-like situation of being groomed and gaslighted, and the people around him, and brainwashed him, most certainly brainwashed. And then, Fizz started being physically abused. Now, how do I know that? Because he told me, and I still have 700 unplayed messages about how he was physically abused. And anybody knows me or my dad knows we don't lie. Now, who's more likely to lie? The old saying is, follow the money. See who got all the money for 35 years. I didn't get all the money. I didn't get hardly any of the money, to be honest. My daddy didn't live for money. He made it for his first family, and this person came in and took it all. But follow the money and follow the evidence. Okay, who died? Who was he with when he died? How did he die? Look at the video. Again, I have a lot of evidence. So when the abuse had become physical, he begged for my help. He wanted to be set free. And I said, Dad, he was afraid for his life. He said this person had a history of, doing this to another husband. And again, I must say, I don't want harm to come to this person, because my dad and I, we discussed it repeatedly. He said, sort of lightheartedly, he's like, Mark, I could just kill her. And I'm like, no, Dad, you can't do that. He goes, I know. But then he would get so depressed and angry because of the evil that was being done to him. He had never done this before. He wanted to kill himself. He wanted to take his mobility scooter into the road and get hit by a car. He wanted to, go through a plate glass window there, a sliding door, kill himself. And he, the knives that she threatened him with, that I even heard, he wanted to slit his throat. But my dad was never like that. But that's what happens when you're around such evil, around the devil, and then you're threatened all the time, and you're used and abused, and then the people around you love, like me, told by this woman and this government and this female judge who's got blood on her hands, you know what? In your father's dying years, you're not allowed to be with him, Mark. Really? Why? Bill, because you're a threat to your father. You're going to hurt your father. Really? Or you're just with your father for money. So, anyway, so having said that again, my father, I think, in a sense, was crucified. And now I, as his follower, in a sense, and I'll give an update. And if this message gets cut off again, I'll just offload some of the storage, and then, or if the power, although I'm charged up, I should last. I could be like, one of his disciples and be crucified myself, because when you're the better or more godly person, you're not willing to kill people for money. You don't lie and have people falsely arrested and jailed for money, and you don't steal. I mean, I certainly don't steal from my dad. I mean, she stole money I sent to my dad for him, and she stole it. Joseph sent money, but again, he just was really just supporting her. And my dad never got to see, most of the money. She'd get it, and, and you even heard a video of her trying to get to his last bank account where his Social Security money was, because what she would do is anytime money came in, she would put it in a secret bank or bank accounts, and through a secreted post office box as well, and the money would be saved for her to live after my dad was dead. She didn't want to spend the money on my father while he was alive. He had to beg for it. He couldn't get it. Even his own Social Security, and you heard how upset he was about it in that, accidentally recorded phone call I have. So I'll get to these arrests and these 6 other phone calls and these deposition calls that I mentioned. But anyway, in regard to the spiritual part again, my daddy, in a sense, was crucified, betrayed, suffered, died, and was buried, as the scripture says. Of course, I am also being persecuted in that way, and if I'm not crucified in a sense, I tend to think my story is going to be something more like John the Baptist, who, a woman danced for the king, the woman's daughter, and under the woman's support, and they said, "What do you want?" I'll give you anything. "Oh, I want the head of John the Baptist." So if I get jailed because I'm defending my daddy and I tell the truth, and police don't do their jobs, and judges don't do their jobs, and the bureaucracy and the agencies I've dealt with, 90% women, don't do their jobs, I get thrown in jail, and it's very hard not to want to kill yourself in jail. And if I hang myself, in a sense, my head got cut off. So I'd rather be the one disciple that was, cast off to an island and just left to write, and, John the Revelator, and just, on the island of Patmos. That's what I want. But it's going to be very hard to get. It was hard to do it when my daddy was alive. And like I said before, people didn't care much about him when he was alive. They're not going to care much about him when he's dead. A lot of people don't care about me. I have 2 people, basically. One reached out to me. She knows who she is after my father died. Try to offer support. And then one of my longest friends, he's always supported me on Facebook. So I appreciate his help. But not a lot of people reached out while my daddy was hurting, or me trying to save him. Not a lot of people reached out after the funeral. I mean, wishing condolences or anything. Although I, and again, I wasn't, I had to be threatened with arrest if I went to the funeral. Joseph helped with that, helped to make sure I got arrested. Thought he was doing me a favor, saying, "Oh, you know what, I don't want to get in the story," because I could get to that whole story again. But anyway, so, and there was one other person, and I'm just going to say this because I had it in my notes here. I felt bad about this, my niece, who I've only seen maybe 3 times in the last 35 years, because her mother is evil, but which sent me a letter, and a text message about condolences, and she's was always a pretty nice girl. Regrettably, and I feel a little bit bad about this, I had to tell her to just basically go to hell, but she didn't deserve, I don't say she didn't deserve it, but it was guilt by association, because I never met her husband. I don't think much of the man. I sent him a request to introduce myself. He rejected it. But her mother is just totally evil and cannot be trusted. And I can't, my father's life depended on him having, people to help him, and this Jessica's mother never helped. I mean, she was a hindrance. In fact, I can tell you one story, just typical, is my father, she had lent my father her car. She didn't lend it to him as much as she said, can I keep it there? She needed a place to keep it, where he was staying with this, this evil, wicked woman my father called the pig whore bitch. So having said that, he wanted to get away from her. She was beating on him one day, and he wanted to go for a ride, and he asked me to go with him, and we either went to OTB down the street, or he wanted to go get something to eat. He just wanted to get out of there and be with me. So he took the car, and I was riding with him. And at some point during the driving, he asked me to drive. He knew how to drive fine. He didn't have Alzheimer's. He knew what he was doing. He just got tired or something, or he wanted to eat while I drove, or he wanted to read, or he wanted to get on the phone. He wanted to do something, so he asked me to drive. Next thing I know, I get calls from his daughter Tony, Jessica's mother, and of course this Donna, who repeatedly had me falsely accused and arrested, and I'm going to get to those arrests and those deposition statements, threatening, again, listen to this, even this daughter, Tony, who worshipped this Donna, said, if you don't get this car back, I'm going to have you arrested. Threatening to have me arrested again, that I stole Tony's car, which I didn't do, and I'm taking and trying to help and save my father, and to them that's worthy of arrest, that I stole the car. I can still remember pulling off to the side of the road and say, Dad, I was livid. I'm like, these people will never end with their evil. All my daddy wanted to do was get away from being beat up. All he wanted to do was have, and I wanted to do was help my dad and be with his son, do something he enjoyed, things he was disallowed from doing. And I'm called to be threatened with arrest because he has her car. These people are evil, pure, sinful evil. So, anyway, again, I don't know how I'm going to keep moving forward. In a sense, my dad got both his legs cut off. I've had one of my legs cut off. I'll never be the same again. I wanted this woman not only to ever not come into my father's life, but to be gone, just like my dad. Because, again, the story is quite simple. A gold digger who used and abused and went through his house, his cars, his businesses, all his money, destroyed his family, didn't bring him in any children, was criminal, alleged to my father. Not alleged, he told me. He had to cover up for at Bingo City, a company they came up with. He had to get a felony. She gets the money. Any money, his Social Security, he said I was only in my dad's life so I could steal his Social Security. Really? She is, you heard her, berate my father, threaten my father for his Social Security, takes all the money, and like I said, got paid money, and gets, all this money to not take care of my father, where I'm giving my father 3 life savings just to try to, help him. I'm paying him to help him. So again, this, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So, the abuse became physical. I mean, he lost, again, his mind, not because he ever had Alzheimer's or dementia, but he was brainwashed, he was groomed, he was gaslighted, like in a cult. He had to be deprogrammed and get out of this cult, and he tried, and he wanted to. For 3 years, he and I tried. But she used and manipulated everybody to make sure, because, again, the situation was quite simple. A gold digger didn't want her husband, her bread and butter, her bell cow, to leave, her golden goose to leave. She wanted to make sure she got all his money, all his possessions, every bit of him. And she was more happy to see him dead than I was, than to see him alive. While me, all I want was my daddy to be alive. He and I both knew how to put finances and money in perspective, And then she accused me of stealing his Social Security. Really? My dad called me up and said, Mark, I want you to call Social Security. Tell me where my money is. I can't get it. She takes it. I can't I can't go to the dollar store. I don't have $5 for an ice cream cone. I can't buy a dollar lottery ticket. She won't give me my own money, my own Social Security. So she lied and said that's what I was doing. She also lied and said I stole his Social Security so I could sign him up to free sports betting accounts, which I did. He wanted to bet. She wouldn't let him. It's his money. He's like, Mark, you won't even give me my own money. So I said, well, Pop, I'll tell you what. I'll fly to 12 different states. I'll open up, legally accounts in your name. I'll put up the money. They give us a free bet matched, 100% in most cases. You put down $1,000, you get $1,000 free bet. You put down $500, you get a $500 free bet. If we win, I'll pick the winners, because it's actually illegal for me to place a bet for my father to play who he tells me, over another state. I knew that. It's like interstate, whatever it's called. Even I think with legal wagering, if you're, in a state that has it and a state that doesn't. So I don't, I'm not one who breaks the law, certainly not on purpose. Certainly when it comes to things like that, I waited 20 years to do it with my dad. And even Joseph, who told me to effing, don't be you're a Christian scumbag, scammer, I'm not doing any sports things with you. So that's just him, and I'll get to that maybe in a bit here. So I traveled to these states, and if I won I put up the money. My dad couldn't get to his money. He didn't have money for most of the time anyway. She was going through all of it. She was certainly not going to allow it to be sent. And he was, he trusted her to kind of do secretarial things, which of course she only did to profit from. She didn't really want to help my father. So I'd send them money, I'd win, and I'd take, if I won $1,000, I'd keep $500, which basically just covered my expenses for the airfare. I'd have to sleep in the airport because I couldn't really afford hotels most of the time. I'd have to pay food, rent, my bills. So my $500 was already gone. The $500, anywhere between $150, $100, $250, $500, even $1,000 one time, I think twice, denominations in a sense. I'd send to my dad. He never got to keep them. She went and she took it. It'd come in the mail, she'd take it. He'd hide it, she'd take it. He'd hold on to it, she'd say, give it to me, you're going to forget where you put it. She'd take it. She'd threaten him. You better give me that money. And this is, now I'm going to lead to these arrest things and these depositions. Okay? And that's what she did. And my father, again, and then she wrote to the government that's, I stole his Social Security number, and that, I was, going to get him in trouble with the law. You mean from the Bingo City felony? See, here's the thing. My father took a felony for her actions at Bingo City. He had to take the blame. That's on his record. 3 strikes and you're out for felonies. My father was never a felonious criminal. But she told this, judge for this protection order, and again, this judge was totally evil. Mark's going to get his father in trouble because Mark gives free stock advice and Mark sends his father money. Really? I'm going to get him in trouble? I noticed you kept all the money. She kept all the money. I don't want to ever act like I'm talking to her. I avoid this human being at all costs. She's a monster. So, she claimed that, I was going to put my father in criminal jeopardy. Really? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, everything she and her supporters, his own children who rather believe her, claimed and accused, she did. So let me give these deposition statements because I gave them before and I'll try to be brief. So I have, again, everything on recording. I have my dad's recordings. I had, what they call butt dialed calls. The one you might have already heard, you can just click on. It's pretty obvious. This woman disrespects the man, dishonors the man, is manipulating, threatening him to get to his last bank account. Wants to make sure she controls all the money, has the money, secrets away the money. My father's like, what more do you want from me? Skin, you have everything already. Just totally, it's just totally indicative of abuse. There's no denying it, and I knew all the other facts as well around it. So again, my father butt dials me, and I kind of, but it bears repeating. I think mentioned this on the last life update I gave. Let me just check time here. Okay, 30 minutes, about halfway there. So I'll have to go a little quicker. This might be an hour and a half because that's how long the others seem to be. So maybe God just has me landing on that. So I overhear a call, and I hear knives, and I hear somebody, and I won't use the word, but they did, saying, like effing this. And my father sounds like he's in trouble. And I'm thinking, well, he sounds like he's in public. I thought he was like at a bar or a restaurant that has a bar, and maybe some biker type of person is threatening my dad because the person is just totally berating my father. So I listen more closely, and it's her. And they're in a kitchen, it sounds like, because he had this little desk in the kitchen where he had to stay at her house. Of course, he's a businessman who took a company public on the stock market, and he had that's what he did, and had built companies all his life. She has a locked private office upstairs in the house that she bought with his money, made a move to in Schenectady, but he's left like I don't know, Bob Cratchit or Tiny Tim, whatever the guy's name, in his little desk, crowded, and just left there to sit in the kitchen all day long. But her luxurious office upstairs, where she never had a real job. Her jobs were, just making money off my father and the man before her. That's just what my dad said. And this other man who he alleged my father couldn't stand this woman, this Ann, threw a guy out a 9th-story window. And it's disgusting. My father said this Ann was almost as evil as her sister, and the first person to write, an obituary. Oh, we're going to miss the good times and the merriment, or whatever she said. Really, what a cover-up. What an insulting, offensive thing for the first obituary on one of these obituary sites of my dad. My dad hated that human being. He said her and her boyfriends and the woman's sister would go off everywhere with her boyfriends on vacation. So I probably mentioned that, so I'll move on. So I heard this person, you're not effing getting any more of my effing money. You're not effing getting $200. You're lucky I effing feed you. You know what I can do to you, like a violent threat. You don't effing sit down. You're lucky I almost said the word. And I heard this person, and I'm like, this is her talking to my dad? My dad's like, I don't get to, please help me. It's my money. No, it's effing my money. All the money is my money. I'm done with you losing my effing $200. Now, I came to find out later the $200 was typically the startup money my father would use to put in his horse racing account, because this was on a Saturday, I think, and that's when he wanted to do the horses. He put it in his OTB, off-track betting, account. And he always, he always had usually always profited. Same with his sports betting account. And I'll get to that here in a minute. But of course, she was going to get that money when he died anyway. She set up the accounts. She had the access to the accounts. But he wanted to get the money while he was alive. He wanted to play the horses, do something he enjoyed. She wouldn't allow it. And he always won. It's not like he was losing. And it's his money. It's his money. It's a portion of his Social Security money. But nope. So she's effing him, threatening. I hear the knives rattling. And my father left repeated messages. Mark, she came at me with a knife, but she only said she was joking. Or she's throwing this knife at me, Mark. She's going to kill me. Mark, she's threatened me. She broke my ribs. She threw me down. She bloodied my nose. I saw. You have the video. I was on a FaceTime call with my father. She's screaming in the background. Don't show this video to Mark. You're going to get me in trouble. Don't show this. Stop, stop it. And my father's crying with a blood, she just punched me in the nose, Mark. She punched me, she hit me. My father's got no reason to lie. And if he was lying, which he wasn't, then let him go. He wanted to be out. He was afraid. He was terrified. He was getting beaten up. Spousal abuse, IPV, I've studied all these things, cults. He's getting used and abused. It's a crime. But try to tell that to blue, Democrat, woke, female-empowered New York. Now, I'll get to the other deposition statements, but here's the thing that I have to mention, so I don't forget, is, I've studied spousal abuse for 35 years when I got into ministry. And most of the time it is the guy, what they call wearing the wife beaters, the ribbed white muscle shirts, and the guy is beating up the woman, OJ and Nicole. The guy gets angry, he gets depressed, the woman's with another man, she might have, cut off his resources, stopped having sex with him after marriage, used him, made him look like a fool, whatever. And you get angry and you hurt somebody and you lie about it and you do this and that. Most times it is a guy. But now statistics show it's actually 50-50, that women can be as abusive to men, particularly old men. Or men who they used and abused for money. Because with females, they're getting more empowered. They're getting more money. They have, more status, more jobs. They're feeling more, we had a female vice president who basically, along with Jill Biden and Nancy Pelosi, ran the country. Okay? So these women becoming tougher, more masculine, that balances the scales of this abuse. But in the abuse network, I'll call it that, whether it's the and I've dealt with all of them, the domestic violence hotline, the government, the agencies, APS, which is Adult Protective Services, it's mostly women. It's 90%, even probably 95% women. And their job and duty is to protect women. So when you call up and you tell them that a man is being abused,
they already instinctually, habitually, internally have already kind of said, well, it must not be true. You know, it's the woman. You know, we have to protect the woman still. We're either protecting him from the man, or the man who says or makes the call to protect an abuse victim, or the man who's claiming he's being victimized. Maybe he's just making it up. I mean, the whole network. It's very, they don't want to hear, they don't believe, they have a hard time understanding that an elderly man, look at the life of this guy, Casey Kasem. This kind of same thing happened to him, the old radio DJ. But I had to deal with all these people. These, you know, all, and I'm like, well, you're gonna, you know, you're not doing your job. Do your job. My father tried to beg this chief of police in East Greenbush, New York, you know, do your job, save me, help me, listen to my story. No, I'm going to listen to the woman, she's befriended me, and I'm going to do a favor for, you know, my husband, whose friend is Joseph DiBello, and I'm going to, you know, turn the other cheek, and I'm going to let this woman take my father, this pig whore bitch, abuser, user, take my father to another state or city, where she can continue this abuse. And I tried to tell the police there, woman, no, I don't, you know, I don't know, tried to tell APS, well, why do you want, you know, you don't like the people we send out. They sent out a 25-year-old, overweight, large, black woman, not very intelligent, my father said, to try to, you know, solve this case, if you will. The woman, the abuse, you know, the one my father said was abusing him, she's like threatening of course that's how it works. She threatens my dad. Oh, he's demented, he's a liar, you know, lock him in the room, you'll be gone soon. And then this Donna even gave this woman $20, my father said she gave her $20 and said, thanks for coming. It was like a bribe. Of course, I tried to report it to APS. APS is like, oh, our person wouldn't do that. APS says, why do you want to talk to a male with more experience? What are you, a misogynist? Well, because you women aren't doing anything. You're protecting your own, you know, you're protecting her. She's a liar. She's beating up this man. All the man wants to do is leave. And then when I finally did get to a male, he was like, no, I don't see any abuse here, really. How about the man just wants to leave and she won't let him leave? Threatening him with a mental institution if he doesn't quiet down. I mean, these, and I mean, I don't want to get in the whole thing again, but I mean, and then her supporters like, oh, you know what? We don't believe Mark. We believe her. And she sends out this email like, Mark and your father are liars. Really? Follow the money. You, if any family members or relations, find anybody who said Tony DiBello lied to them, or find anybody in the last 35 years that said, I lied to you. Find anybody. But no, she's telling the truth. Lie, steal, and destroy. So the second deposition statement, again, I told you is one, and I have like 6 of them. So one, I have the recording saved. The other 2 or 3, I think, were on my other computer that she was behind getting stolen right outside my door. She was responsible in a way for that. And so that record is on there. And the other one I heard was, I told you, my father, she's like, would you kill for me? And my father's like, you know, she's like, if you want to eat, you'll kill for me. It's like one of these things you'd see in a cult. You know, I studied them all. Manson, Jim Jones, Marshall Applewhite, I think his name was, or Applewhite with Heaven's Gate, Raniere with the cult even in Albany, David Koresh. I mean, I've studied all, and I don't think Koresh was as much a cult, but that's another story. But either way, I've studied cults. I've studied, you know, prisoners of war and brainwashing. I mean, my daddy, why would he lie? All he wanted to do was leave, and I you know, and he knew. He's like, Mark, I'm going to go, you know, I wanted a divorce because I'd like to get some of my property back at least. And that was what he thought was the best option. And I'm being, you know, my father and I were being, you know, thoughtful. He's like, Mark, she belongs in jail. And in retrospect, she did belong in jail. If she was in jail, my father would still be alive. So I wanted her out of my life. But now I also believe she belongs in jail. I knew she belonged in jail then, but I was like, turn the other cheek. Dad, don't kill her. Don't kill yourself. Of course, you know, you don't mean that. You know, we protect life. We love life. You know, let's just leave her. You know, Joey can help financially, perhaps. I now can help you financially because I had a major, you know, financial victory one day. You know, God, we have all the money we need. I mean, these betrayers of his thinking she was taking care of them. For like, yeah, she made $2 million over 35 years and spent it all taking care of my father, which she wasn't. We could have gotten him I could have gotten him a professional. I could have gotten him nobody. I would have done it. If whatever he needed, I would have done it. But I kind of mentioned that the last message. So that's the other, like one of the other calls I heard, her threatening him. You know, you're going to get you're either not going to eat, or you know what the kind of demise you're going to meet, which is like threatening with the knife that I heard. And you know, I run this cult. She didn't say cult. She's like, I run this. I own all this, not you. Not your kids. You remember, your kids are going to, you know, she was like, you'd kill your kids for me, won't you? She's like, yes, I would. I'm like, Dad, what are you saying? So anyway, and I apologize, this message isn't totally coming out the way I want it to, but I'm going to keep going and get through it. So now I'm going to go to these arrest things, because I mentioned two, and it related, you know, to what this evil person sent me, you know, my arrest record. So let me just tell you a couple of, you know, some were arrests and some were, you know, interactions, I'll call them, with the police. Because here's the thing. I don't want to call it a gift, it's a curse. I have a curse. I get everybody's evil. If you're a liar, you'll lie to me. If you're a thief, you'll steal from me. If you're an abuser, you'll abuse me. If you're a killer, you'll want to kill me. I mean, I get everybody's evil, it seems. Whatever your evil is, even if you appear to be a good person, you will make your mistakes, if you will. You will do your wrong. You will do your ungodliness toward me. So I have a history. This is just a curse of being spiritual. For 35 years, I have a history of getting your evil and trying to, and certainly believing and thinking I'm much more godly than anybody who, you know, was in the life of my father. So I mentioned this, you know, when I drank, you know, which I did admit, and I haven't done in 30 years, March 3rd, 1991, is that, you know, I had arrested once for like drinking, DWI. And then I turned myself in. I mentioned that arrest. So this person said I was embarrassed. My high school was embarrassed by me. That's why I'm not in their Hall of Fame. But I don't want this to relate to that as much as, let me just share for the record these arrest situations, and the ones that I know I've had since, well, I'll go back to 1987, I guess, 1986. Like I said, I told this one before. A year or two into her being with my father, she's in his house. I go up and I ask him in the kitchen. She's standing right next to me to borrow something to drive. He says, sure, take the red truck. The keys are right there on the table. I take the keys. I go down. There's two red trucks. One I had never seen before. Apparently it's one belonging to her husband, who, according to my dad, died under suspicious circumstances. It was no accident. That's what he said. A gunshot death. I didn't know whose truck it was. I never saw it before, but that's the one he said, take and borrow. And I said, okay. I take the truck, I borrow it, I come back, I'm on my way back in the morning to return it. I call him, she listens into the call and calls the police then and says, be on the lookout for Mark DiBello. Because when I got arrested, which I'm like, why am I getting pulled over? Arrested. And this was in the days where, you know, like police, you know, behaviors weren't monitored, weren't filmed, but both these cops, this one guy who I mentioned already, Mayano, and this one guy, Haskins, threatening me. I mean, I had $900 cash in my pocket, 9 $100 bills. I remember they frisked me. The money is blowing out onto the Stewart's parking lot. They only retrieved like 700 or 800 of the dollars. Like, you're not going to need that money where you're going, that kind of thing. But threatening, we want to kill you, we're going to shoot you. I'm like, why am I being arrested? Donna DiBello called to report that Mark DiBello stole a truck. I'm arrested. 6 days in a cement cage. I get out. I ask her about it. She says, well, I'll do it again. You and your father need to know I'm the boss. I'm in control. I will own all of this. I will not let you and him think you're in control. And I will do it again. Like, you were there. You heard. My father said, let me borrow the truck. But that's the way she operates. Lie, steal, and try to destroy. So that's an arrest. Oh, okay, I guess I was, guilty of stealing a truck that my father gave me keys to borrow. Okay, so that's one. Here's another one. My father, now I'm homeless in L.A., trying to live, trying to be a TV minister in a sense and do all the shows I ended up doing. But for years, I had to live in, I stayed in the airport. I lived outside. I was homeless. I actually, for many months, lived in a public bathroom at a library where they would lock the library at like 5 o'clock. So at 4:59, I'd go in the library because they had like outdoor access that they would lock. And I'd have to, sit up on the toilet and hide, so if they looked under the stall, they wouldn't see me. And they'd lock the bathroom, and I would, have to sleep on that tile floor. But at least I had a roof over my head. So I'd stay there, and then at, 8 a.m. or whenever the library opened, 7:59 every morning, I'm back up. I'm, propped up on the toilet, they'd open the door, and then I could go out for the day, which I'd either go out and do work, or I'd have to spend it at the library, whatever. I did that for many months, and like I said, I'd have to, find shelter and wherever I could. So my father is writing his life story, and he says, I'm going to spend $1,000 to get it reviewed. I said, Pop, she's handling it. Of course, the whole life story is tainted in a positive favor for her. I'm mentioned in it once. I said in a poem that I wrote. All my years with my dad, that's all I'm only mentioned once, and it's just a reference to a poem I made. That and the game show Millionaire. And I might get to that story. Let me see how much time I got here. Okay. So I said, Pop, give me half that, please. Let me write the review. I can write, Pop. I love you. I will give you the best review ever, and I can eat. I can have a roof over my head for a night. It's been 2 years, Pop. I'm homeless. I'm tired. He's even then, he's like, Mark, I'll send you money, but I didn't want his money. And he couldn't send it anyway. She wasn't going to allow it. I told you the birthday, card story last thing, how if he gave her money to send, she would never send it. So he said, well, whatever. So she controls him. She gets the review. She pays $1,000 to this company, Kirkus, and you can go online now and look at the review. And the review, this Jewish company, I'm like, they're not going to write a good review of a godly Christian man like my dad. Sure enough, Tony DiBello's book thinks it's going to be a movie. He's dreaming. And it was a bad review. So he gets, but that was her decision. Can't give Mark any money. Forget, can't do that. So foolish me, stupid me, sees an abandoned suitcase, not in the lobby where they would normally store it, but in one of the hallways. And I said, I'm just going to go through this suitcase. I don't know, maybe there's something. I didn't know if they left it or what. It was stupid to do. I should have just left it. I knew it wasn't mine, but I'm like, well, I need help. I need something. But I'm not a criminal, so I take the credit card in there, and I go to the hotel right next door, and it wasn't long before the police found me in the room trying to sleep. But I'm not a good criminal. So I got arrested for that, and I have to spend time in jail and then in this, like one of these rehab places, like outreach rehab types of places. Months I had to spend there. It was, but what was I, you're desperate. You're 2 years homeless, hungry. What was I going to, my own father betrayed me in a sense. But I knew he didn't do it on his purpose, on purpose. He had to do what she commanded him to do. And, she was pulling all the strings. So that's one. And then the other arrest I mentioned is, and there's a recording. I got it up, and I'll get all these recordings up somewhere online for the record. But my father calls me up. He says, Mark, I just won like $2,500. She's going to take it. I'm not going to see any of it. Please help me get a bank account so I can put this money away so I can get at it. Plus, and I'd worked on this for 2 years. He wanted to live with me, so I had 2 appointments with landlords. He wanted to get out of there safely, save his life. He wanted to get a divorce, so I had an appointment with with a lawyer there who had an office in Saratoga. And like I said, he wanted to go to the bank, and he wanted to go to the dinner, and we could maybe go to the racetrack the next day. So I spent $50, which was a lot of money for me. I get him up in the Uber. He's worried. He's in the bank. He's like, my accountant's not going to let me do this. I go, Dad, you don't have an accountant. He goes, and he's like, and I knew who he meant. And I'm like, Pop, you begged me to come up here. And these 2, female bank people are like, there's 15 minutes to go before the bank closes. And none of the people are like, waiting on us. I'm like, ma'am, can we get this? We're having a personal conversation. These 2 bank managers. Don't interrupt us. 2 women. Don't interrupt. You're having a personal conversation. How about doing your job? This man can't you see he doesn't like being here? Not that he didn't want to be with me. He was just, he was feeling kind of sickly because he hadn't been eating. And he wanted water. And I'm like, it takes 5 minutes. I just need him to co-sign my account that I opened. It takes 2 seconds, but no. The bank wouldn't let it, not that they wouldn't let us do us, they wouldn't wait on us. So I'm like, Pop, and now he's worried about the water. I'm like, Dad, I'll get you her. Then she wants to call him. And he wants to call her. I'm like, Dad, you know what's going to happen when you call her. She's going to get you out of this bank. She doesn't want you to, she's doing everything to make sure he didn't have any independence, freedom, or money. So sure enough, the bank shuts their doors on us, kicks us out. My father's off on the phone with her. Yes, Mark's not hurting me. She's like, telling him, Mark hurting you? Of course I'm not hurting him. Next thing you know, she's on the other line. It looked to me like calling the police. Some bodybuilder, big guy, comes screaming around the corner because I told my father, I said, Dad, I'm like yelling at him because he's on the sidewalk and I'm in front of the door. I'm like, great, Dad. not yelling in a mean, hurtful sense. I said, Dad, great. There's no recovering, Dad. 2 years we spent on this. You're going to regret this, Dad, that we didn't get this done. Oh, she's got it. She's telling me to do this and do that and this and that. Next thing you know, within seconds, the cops are there. Like I'm, Pablo Escobar, three cars, multiple police. Why? She's trapped the whole thing, set up a trap again, which she did at Saratoga Race Course with my dad. And I'm arrested. I'm like, why am I being arrested? Well, again, unknown to me, she took out this protection order. Unknown to my dad, contempt of court. You're not supposed to be with your father. I had no idea. He's called me up. He begged me. And I wasn't even, I didn't want to, none of it. None of what was true. I was doing everything to help and save my daddy. Everything. But that's what she did. Just like with the racetrack. My father, for years, he'd drive up to the racetrack. 30, I don't know. He went to the racetrack since he was like 8 years old. So for like 80, 90 years. 80 years, 70, 80 years. Worked as 18 years old to get his own car so he could just drive and have, be independent. Every year he'd drive a new Cadillac up to the track, take us all up to one of his favorite places to go. He gets with her, she tells him he's got to take a city bus, one of these CDTA services to the racetrack. 2 hours. It's already a 1 hour drive in a car. 2, 3, but how long it must have taken one of these city things. She's not going to drive him up. But this day, she drove him up. And I said, well, something must be up here. Sure enough, I go to greet my dad. We hug. We kiss each other. Kiss on the lips. We pray. 2 seconds later, some guy putting a yellow envelope under my arm. She was there the whole time. I guess he's a process server. I don't just read random yellow envelopes. I don't know what that means. It was misspelled, lowercase b, just like she misspelled my father's name the time she knew him. And certain agencies or government does. They don't spell my father's name correctly with a capital B. His last name. I'm like, oh, this can't be good. But she, the whole time, process server, I just dropped the father off. He's with the son. Go get the son now. Taking my father to a simple father-son day at the racetrack. In fact, we hated talking about her when we were together. We wanted nothing to do with her. We just wanted to be together. But of course, paranoid and plotting the whole time. So that's another police interaction. Again, I already mentioned the police arrest. Here's a couple other interactions, just for whatever reason, I'm going to mention these. I'm so limited on time, but... So I mentioned about this, she sends this email to her 3 best converts, Joseph, Lisa, and Amy. Mark's ripping off your father. He stole a social security number, this and that. So Joseph, Mark can't, is disallowed from sending emails to tell these kids what's going to happen and what is truthfully happening. And they all have their gods. Joey, money, horses. Lisa, her girlfriend, running her town in money. Brad is music. Tony, just mentally ill and she worships this Donna and drinking. She likes drinking. Amy, just being a manager, burned through 2 husbands because, she has to have control. Julie, her bubble and her daughters. Susan, her husband, because she couldn't get it, she has no other choice for a husband, and whatever. I guess even, her belief in Jesus, but not in a godly sense, not living a Christ-like life. Certainly not for, when you don't honor your father who gave birth to you. But those were all gods before my own daddy. Not me. My daddy was my heart. Other than the God, the Heavenly Father, my daddy was my life. So I can't even take him to a thing at the racetrack. But the reason I mention that is a story about Joseph. I guess as a favor to my father, he hires me for a day. He runs this, collection company. That's what he does, Bank of America, Navy Federal Credit Union, was a collection agent for decades, for years until he took over the company, and I told you, I give him credit for 5 things out of 50, but that was his life. You have cancer, we don't care, pay your bill. You're sick, I don't effing care, pay your bill. And so I did this job one day, and I was told I'd make no sales. Rare you'd get any on the first, not sales, closes, like the collections. Some people get 1. I knew I would be good at it. I'd be good at anything. 8. I was up to 7 or 8 in the day. And and the reason I had done it was because I'd wanted to get a job. Okay, God bless. Sorry, I had to offload some of that content. So I know this message is again going longer than I wanted it to, and it's not as clean and precise as I want it. But let me finish up these stories, and I'll get to these few notes and try to keep an update here and record my life. So again, with this story with this Joseph, I go down there
And I knew he was a bully type of guy anyway. And, he worked a long time collecting money until he became the boss of the place that collected money. Now he's got like 200 people all day long. That's what they do. And that's why he's, very rich. So as soon as I go to his office, he's like, and I told you the coach's name from college was Tressman. Joseph was like, sit down, don't talk. I don't want to hear about God or Coach Testicle, already demeaning a man he doesn't know. I own you for the time you're here. I'm the boss. You don't talk back. You don't cry. I don't want to hear about God. I don't want to hear about anything. You're going to do exactly what I tell you to do. I said, fine. So while I was there, for the first day, and I give him credit, he gave me his car to borrow. But with Joe, every time he tries to help you, he ends up hurting you more. I mean, like I said, he even did it the 5 times he helped me. And all I did was work. He gave me money. I doubled the money. I worked for my father. I did all these things for the family. I even worked for Joseph. I mean, he didn't know it. I didn't tell him all the time, because I didn't want gifts or handouts. But one of the things I can mention I did is my father and I, we read the racing for him for the horses. So I made sure that they made his, called him up, tracked it down, even called the Cowboys because he has Cowboy Silks to try to broker a deal with all that. But to make sure that our family name was spelled correctly on DiBello Stables, and Joseph DiBello, his name was correctly spelled, because he's either too busy or doesn't pay attention or whatever. But, for the pride of my father and the honor of my daddy and grandfather before him. But anyway, so while I met this Joseph, but again, and then again, I was grateful for what he did, but 45 out of 50 times, deadly and destructive. So the rest of the story is, so I wrote this note saying, well, in case something happens to me, I just want you to understand, I appreciate the opportunity, this and that. And I hid the note at my, desk, cubicle, where you call these people and ask them for money. And he said, we only get like one lunch and a 5-minute break. That's all you get. I said, fine. So I, for the lunch, I took my lunch, but I didn't take the 5-minute break because I wanted to work through it. I wanted to prove myself, and he monitors the calls because, they have rules like what you can say to people. And these people don't, obviously we all get collection calls. I don't, but people recently, I guess, lately, in the old days I used to get them a lot. But, you owe somebody company, you always got to pay your money, whatever. So the day's going on and all these people, they're belligerent about it and, but it doesn't matter. You got to get the money. So at the end of the day, one guy gets on and says something like, F your mother. And I said, I beg your pardon. Now you can't tell them to go to hell, which I say to the spirit and people. Back then, I probably would have said the same thing. I don't think I would say the F word back to them because Joe even announced me at his work, like, here's my brother. He's a good guy. He doesn't do, try not to use bad language around him. So, and he said it like repeatedly. And I said, my mother's deceased. Don't you ever speak that way of my mother again or whatever. So I hung up on the guy. Said, I don't want you, we'll figure out another way to get your money, whatever. I hung up on him. Now I'm incensed. I'm hurt. So I wanted to walk it off, take a walk. And I didn't get my 5-minute break. So I go into the complex, and it's, one of these prefab complexes, like 10 buildings, they all look the same. And there's like 2 or 3, you might see them when, if you've ever been to Florida, these like man-made little rectangular lakes. So I'm circling around one, trying to walk it off. And next thing you know, cop cars come up. Now, again, this was the day before dashboard cams and all this. And these weren't good cops. These were your redneck hillbilly type of cops. They slammed me on the hood of the car. We got a call. You're, doing something like acting crazily or something. I go, really? Well, I'm circling a lake? That's a problem? And don't talk back, this and that. I said, God, please help this, bless me through this interaction. Don't you speak about God. Now, I'm not being as passionate and emotional about it, and dramatic the way it happened, but it happened. Slam me down. Don't you ever mention God in our presence. There is no God. Don't you dare to pray. And then I start, crying at some point. Don't you cry. You cry. You're going to cry your ass to prison. Da-da-da. Like, really? For what? Walking around a lake? But some female, nervous person and a dentist assistant or something saw from building far away your window. Now, of course, I don't want to mention Joe's name because I don't want any negativity to come on him. Imagine if these cops parade me back to this office and, in front of Joseph, because he kept saying, you're going to ruin my company. I'm taking a big chance, bringing you here. I can tell you're going to ruin my company. He said that twice to me when I just went back to visit to pay homage to him and give him some respect and maybe thanks for some of the one of the gifts he gave me. And then I went and I didn't even go to. Oh, and I did go to the office that time. The last time I went to his office because my father begged me to. He's like, Mark, you got to get me some help.
So I went to ask Joseph for this help. Well, I'll finish the story at his office. So the cop said, well, you got one chance basically to get out. Tell us where your office is. And I'm like, it's the first day. I don't know. I'm very confused. Because they're all like numbered, like building A-1 through like A1 through 30, B1 through 30, all the way up to like 10 buildings. It was my first day there. I don't know where it was. And I'm directionally challenged anyway. Well, that got their ire up. So next thing you know, I'm there for like 30 minutes, 40 minutes dealing with these cops trying to stay out of jail. I go back to Joseph. He comes screaming. I go back into the office. He comes screaming out the door. You effing scumbag. Just because you're my brother, you think you can get away with this? It was a 5-minute break. You took 35 minutes. We were counting. F your scumbag. F you. I knew this was a mistake. And then somebody, for whatever reason, gave him this letter. They weren't supposed, it wasn't none of their business. It was in my cubicle, my desk, that letter. And you quit after one day, which is not what I was saying. I effing knew it. You're effing always going to be the same. You'll never change. I get that from him all the time. And that's how this person is. But of course, now he's a multi-gazillionaire. He could have helped my father in one phone call by accepting one phone call. But he can't do it. You can't reach him on phone. He won't allow, and he glorifies this Donna. My father said the same thing. I left recorded messages. You can hear my father's own voice. Mark, he thinks Donna walks away because Donna loves money, power, and control. And she probably kissed Joey's ass and did whatever Joey said because Joey's got money and she can put on the act. But he would rather believe her instead of me and his own father. Now, I can understand his evil toward me because that's just the way he is. He's an atheist. He's not going to believe, somebody who believes in God. Because like I was saying that other story, when I went to see him for help from my dad, I went down as a credentialed press member to the racetrack, Tampa Bay Downs, and I, said, can I talk to you? Father needs help. 30 minutes. You effing, you're not an effing Christian. I don't talk to effing Christians. F your God. F this. F that. You're going to use me. You're effing this. You're only here for money. F this. F that. And really, I actually wasn't. I was just to get my father help. We didn't say it was money. We just wanted to get help. Like, can he talk to you? Can I bring him down here to visit? And well, that was actually the next second to last time. So he ended up, doing, he said, I'll give you some help. And he gave me, an envelope with money in it for my dad, which I gave to tried to help my dad with. And then the last time was when I took him down there, my father, and I was going to say dragged. I didn't drag. My father wanted to go. But I had to pay for the hotel. He pays, covers the hotel for, her, when she goes down, she would take my father down. That's a trip she would take because all expenses paid. She could make money. She could grift Joey for money. The kids go down. They can go to Disney World. My father wants to be saved from abuse, and I want to eat and have rent and stay out of jail. Those aren't worth a nickel. Those aren't worth a nickel to even answer your call. I mean, how evil that kid became. So, anyway, having said that, and he, I put out this bingo city. All of them, not just because she's the leader. Joey followed her. The girls followed Joey. The others followed the money because that's their God too. And that's Joey's God. It's not my God. Money is not my God. So, they all, follow Joey. And, but, he thinks he's rules, he's a God down there at that, company he works, his credit control. He's expendable whether he knows it or not. That company can definitely get by without him. And this horse business he's in, there's there's a racing and wagering board. All of them. And the reason I'm mentioning this is starting with her. But again, she's in Blue Democrat, New York, which is very difficult. But now hopefully things are changing. There's now actually a Republican male, normal, godly, middle-aged white male. These people are usually the godliest of people these days in that family court. But good luck getting through. I still try that. Woman at the, family court, all those people, the gay guys there, all these people. I don't care what you think of me. I'm just telling the truth. These people, if you're that way, you're less godly. Okay? And you don't want to, recognize or see spousal abuse when it happens. Because that's simply what this is. So again, and I'll tell us another story and sort of, another arrest story, or police interaction story. So anyway, they're all culpable, if I could get a lawyer, but again, lawyers cost money, if I could find the right people in the government, which I'm starting to find maybe a little bit, but usually it's a woman. Again, remember, the infrastructure is all women protecting women. And they hear this story, and like my dad used to tell me, Mark, it's unbelievable. And now people think my story's unbelievable. Really? I was there. I'm living it. I heard those phone calls. I got the evidence. I witnessed it. I watched it. Look at it. He's got no house. I mean, my father lost everything. And then she says he leaves no will and no life insurance. Really? Not that, again, I knew he had no money anyway. But you're saying my father didn't want me to have a single belonging? These kids his betrayers couldn't get together and say, you know, let's give Mark at least his hat. Mark loved it that when his father wore that hat, his Korean War veteran hat. No, 3 pieces of paper with Xeroxes of pictures. Nothing, let's help Mark, let's defend our father, let's keep his memory alive. That's all Mark seems to do. She destroyed all of it. I can't even nothing. You don't see hospital news, Greenbush news. All you see is, his bingos, or the felony on his record that's on the internet. And now I'm trying to absolve my father and exonerate him and put up a truthful video that calls out the people who did these crimes and sins. So, anyway, having said that, I mean, they'd all rather, believe her. And I can guarantee you, and I know my father said the same thing. He left the message. Mark, all she does is going to do is profit off my death, even more. She belongs in jail. I should never have turned the other cheek. It's war. And if you're nice for a second and you pick up a wounded soldier, the enemy will shoot you dead. And even if the enemy is wounded and you reach over and say, you know what, you're my enemy, I don't want you to die. You're wounded. I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to take you to the hospital. You go through the process. You become, maybe a prisoner of war or jail or whatever. The war ends, a ceasefire, whatever. You reach over, and that enemy, what do? They still stab you. My father and I are good, godly men who are always trying to just be a little bit, always were more godly. But these people, evil, and especially when it comes to money and how they could support, what they were doing to my father. And I'll give you another example now. I mentioned this arrest stories. So this Lisa DiBello, and I've got a handful of stories with her too. So under the guise of, supposedly helping me, gives me a place to stay for a short time. Again, 1 out of 10 times good. In Rhode Island, I go down and I work for, well, that's not even the story I want to tell. Well, I'll tell that one too quick, since I'm on it. So I go down and I go into my car to this place, Ninigret Park, which is right next to where she lives. I get locked in the park. I'm enjoying nature. There's no sign. I didn't see any sign going into the park. I come out of, I already told this story about, I wanted to get out of the park. The door to the house is open. I'm looking inside. Can somebody help me? I don't know who lives here, but this gate is locked. The park is closed. I'd like to get out. I hear a couple walkie-talkies. I get on one of the walkie-talkies. Can somebody come help me? Apparently, the guy is either the gatekeeper there, or the civil servant, a cop. I don't know what he is, but he's not there. Or she, whoever was there, wasn't there. Apparently, let the house, whatever. I'm in there, and I'm just asking for help. But next thing you know, it's like I'm a major criminal. Because that guy doesn't want to lose his job, so he's going to say, I broke into the house, or I did something wrong, or it's my fault, because he doesn't want to report that he's diligent in his duty, that he's sleeping somewhere, or he's off, whatever, drinking a beer in the woods. But I'm some kind of criminal. And I told the Price is Right story last episode, or last recording, so I'm going to tell another one here real quick, one of my arrest stories. There's actually, I'm going to put 2. One I might save, one I'm going to save for this professional recording, I think. But here's one. So my uncle dies. He's like a second father to me. And I'm coming from the West Coast in the cold, and I have nowhere to stay. Of course, they don't, I'm not allowed to stay at my father's house. Every year at my father's house, when she got in and took control, she kicked all the kids out. I could stay one time, like in my, room for 6 days. It was like 30 years ago, whatever. And then she had, all the rooms. My father had to convert them to rental things to pay for her, lifestyle. Sold the property, pieces of the property. Then I could only stay for 1 day, and I could stay in like a massage room downstairs that my father had, a storage room. Then I could stay oh, something fell in the back. Oh, that sign, whatever. So then I could stay at, I could sleep on the floor. Then when he had to sell the house, I wasn't allowed to even sleep on the floor. I was told I could sleep on the garage floor. Then the last time I was up at the house, I was told I couldn't sleep in the area of the house. I had to sleep outside I could sleep somewhere on the property. So I had to sleep down near the pond in the gazebo that my father had down there. Progressively, every year, he had less control, she had more dominance, and more abuse. More neglect. Really, my father was a big believer in the prodigal son. Prodigal son return. Prodigal son returns. Let me put my son up. Even my own daddy had to, and I know, part of him, he had to, weigh it out, juggle between two things. And I'll give you one of these. Well, so anyway, what story was I going to tell? Oh, the arrest thing. I got so many stories. So I come back from the West Coast. All right, so that's more neglect, more abuse, more, female evil empowerment. Father's own son sees him once a year, can't even stay in his own house. Evil. So my Uncle Joe dies, and I go to I'm at the funeral and I'm at the wake, and I had nowhere to stay. So I asked his landlord, because he had my Joe, like I said, he did everything for my Uncle Joe. He was he was even more godly in a lot of ways than my dad. Priestly, just amazing, and never did me wrong. So there was 6 days left in the month, and he had already paid. I said, can I stay in my Uncle Joe's apartment for 2 days? Plus, I wanted to pray and meditate. I won't get into all the depth of the story because there's much more to it. But, of course, the people there, my father having to, with the puppet master there, and Lisa, and I think Amy, they all had to have their opinion. No, Mark can't stay in his apartment. It's none of your business. You got nothing to do with it. No, you can. It's unright. It's not right. It's something, whatever. I'm like, it's none of your business. He was my uncle. He would say, let Mark stay. He came across country to go to my funeral. He can at least stay in my apartment for 2 days because it's freezing cold. It's snowing. It's wet on the ground. But no, they had some offense with it. So I had to beg now I have to, they're going to cause a contention with the landlord. But thankfully, I stay there for a couple of days. Now, they see to it I get kicked out. Or, they're pretty much behind it. There's no other reason. So I'm out. Or, now, don't hold me to that. I know they were against it the whole time. Maybe the day was over with or something, and the flight didn't leave till 4 in the afternoon or something, and the landlord said, well, Mark, you stayed a couple of days. I need you to get out. I need to refurbish the place or fix it, whatever. But all I know is I leave that night, and I have to spend the whole night outside in the cold. I'll have to remember the details. It's in my journal. This part I know is true, and I remember. And I don't want to relay bad information. So I'm walking in the cold all night to stay warm because I couldn't afford it. I didn't have money at that time. I'm basically, I'm doing homeless ministry for the most part. I'm homeless and I'm doing ministry work. I mean, nobody's giving me jobs. It's all, certain, Jewish people and other people, and you got to be, an executive and short hair and all these things on the West Coast to get a job. You got to be Democrat, and wasn't even political back then. Whatever the case may be. And it's hard to make it in TV. It's hard to get on a show. It's hard to, do whatever. And, of course, my father can't help me. She won't allow it. These brothers and sisters of mine, they're, back then, Joey wasn't a billionaire, so he was a multimillionaire. So, and I didn't ask them for help. I didn't want their help. So, or if I did, they didn't give it. So I'm walking, and I noticed there's a laundromat, and it opens at 6 a.m. My feet are freezing cold. And I knew one thing, and I didn't have gloves, but at least if I got my feet warm, I'd be okay. I could go until, walk around or do something until my flight. So I go into the laundromat and I put my money in the machine and I'm drying my socks just to get them warm. And I actually saw at this point my Uncle Rocky, who didn't know I was there, and I didn't want him to see me. Because I'm looking, I'm beat up, not physically beat up, but I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I've been walking all night, I'm wet. It's snowy, my feet. I don't want to say I'm embarrassed, but I don't want to have my Uncle Rocky, feel any kind of hurt toward this or any kind of responsibility, or he probably would do something. He was always a great guy, my Uncle Rocky. So I'm like, I wish I could say the same about, I think it's his daughters now who betrayed my dad and me, but either way. And I used to help their sons, or at least one of the sons. I think it's the same family. I don't know. But so I watched my Uncle Rocky walk by, and I was like, well, I wish I could almost have had him Uncle Rocky, but I can't because I can't let him see me like this. And he was at the funeral too, and I'm in mourning, thinking about my uncle who died just a day or two before, whatever. And the police come in, a cop, 1 or 2 cops, threatening. We don't want vagrants. You're casing the place for a robbery. You can't be here without having laundry. I'm like, well, I put my laundry right there. There's my laundry. I'll be out of here as soon as it's done. Like, please, 20 more minutes. No, not good enough for me. Whatever. Why are you here? What's your name? Now I'm trying to protect my uncle's name. I'm like, well, geez, if I tell my uncle's name, what are they going to think of him? It's his funeral. I mean, my Uncle Joe got along with everybody in the town. I don't want, them to think his, nephew some scumbag vagrant, casing a coin laundry place to rip it off, whatever. So they throw me in jail, hours in jail. Finally, I'm released because the one chief was actually a pretty decent guy, the cop. He said, well, let me run your fingerprints, your record. I know your uncle died. We all liked your uncle, this and that. So my father is stuck with her and doing, she's making him do whatever, so he can't come. So he says, I'll send Lisa to pick you up out of jail. So I remember Lisa pulls up in this red LeBaron convertible she drove or drives, Miss Fancy Pants. And as soon as I get in the car, you effing scumbag. You effing embarrassed us again. You effing this. What the F did you do now? I mean, constantly with these people. Constantly. Evil, bully, butch, whatever she is. Evil. And that's an arrest story of mine. Now, the third one involves Mel Gibson, but I won't tell that one here. I might tell that as the first story, because I just saw Mr. Gibson on something talking about doing this movie on Joe Rogan Experience called The Resurrection, which is sort of a follow to the Passion of the Christ, which I had the idea for, which I will maybe make this the first story I tell when I prayerfully record this I Am Me, vlog or whatever you want to call it, podcast, tomorrow the 1st, which I'm going to do weekly. But I'm not going to, carry all this baggage necessarily to there. So let me just go through these notes and wrap this up. Let me see some of these stories. So I mentioned these arrests. Oh, no, there's Millionaire. Same story with these Lisa and Amy and these people. So the shows, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? So I've got this guy who comes to my class. I'm teaching a class, and finally got established in LA, on how to get on a game show and win. So this kid, Armand Kachigian, now the video's on my YouTube. He's a doctor, podiatrist. He comes to the class like 7 times. He's been on, 5 times or so. He's been on 7 shows. He's won 0 money, but he's passionate about being on game shows and trivia. And he's an incredibly smart guy. Not so much intelligent as much as he's like, just smart with studying and memorizing things and stuff. But he knew like every trivia question you could ever imagine. He knew the answer. So he comes to my class and he's an atheist. And I said, well, with me, you got to believe in God. So he wants to go on Millionaire. Now you can see this video. So I get him on video, on Millionaire. I'm sorry, he comes to the class. I make him sign an agreement because I'm, consulting for this class. It's 2 years, whatever, and it was going to be 50%. Then I lowered it to 25. Then I said, well, just sign it for 10 because it's just 10, it's a tithe. It's sort of a godly thing, a donation. I can get the charity really established, and I knew this guy was going to win. He could have won the $1 million. So I signed the agreement. Long story short, he betrays the agreement. He tells me on a flight, he says, I'll take you to Las Vegas, I'll take you to dinner for your gift. Really? Well, I got news for you, kid, because he went on, he won $500,000. I said, you owe me $50,000. No, I'm disputing that. I don't believe in God. Even though we prayed together the night before the show, I no longer believe in God, and you're lying. I'm not going to pay you money. I go, what are you talking about? I'm lying. Armand, you came to my class 5 times. We signed this thing. Now, he goes, why didn't you tell me about it? I go, tell you about it. You signed it a year ago. Now, the reason I didn't tell this guy was because I know him. If he was to hear, now I knew he knew about the agreement. I just didn't remind him about it the day before the show when he called me from his room, because I'm like, if he thinks he's the type who'll spiritually sabotage, Satan would, and he would just be knocked off his game a little bit to think that he would have to give me 10% of what he won. I know he would make more money if I just didn't remind him about the agreement. It was a good tactical, selfless coaching move by me. So, but sure enough, he wins the $500,000, but he doesn't want to donate or pay. Now, I have to tell you something else about this guy, but back then, ministerially, I didn't tell this. But he was ripping off his clients. He told me openly, he says, Mark, I take their socks off, I bill them like 10 times, I get it from the government, this, that. He was running a totally crooked podiatry doctor business. And then he banks this $500,000 and I get nothing. And I got to go to court to try to, now there's a lot more story to this, but I'm going to keep it brief because it gets to my father, try to get a court. I get a lawyer, I get a court, the lawyer's working on commission. I said to the lawyer, all you got to do is show the videotapes, because Armand, in his statement, he never came to my class. The lawyer didn't want to show the videotapes. So I sit down in the witness box, and the female, woke, blue, Democrat, California, sitting right next to me, says this, with God as my witness. I take the oath, I sit down. She looks at me, turns to me, and says, I'm not going to rule in your favor. I said, I just sat down. She goes, yeah, but you're not wearing a tie. You see the plaintiff or whatever? I don't know if he's the defendant or plaintiff. I guess he's the defendant. He's wearing a tie. He's got short hair. You have long hair and no tie. I'm not going to be ruling in your favor. I said, should I bother even telling my story? So I'm all rattled already, and I get tongue-tied in court. Anyway, always being dragged in there, and you're fighting. You can't win. You can't beat the judge. You can't beat the people. I told you what wins in court: like, lawyer, and liar. And I'm not liked. I don't have a lawyer, and I'm not. I don't lie. But the lawyer, I said, so Armin goes on the stand and says, "Oh, I never even went to Mark DiBello's class. He's lying. He's making that up. I've never went to any of these game show classes. I got him on video. He's on national TV 5 times. Yeah, I had him interviewed at every one of these because he liked it. He was good at it." But the lawyer's like, I don't want to take the videotapes out. I don't want to show them, or I don't have time, whatever. Thanks, great. So I lost, all that. So as part of that, after all that, or during that process, I said, well, Armin, listen, I want to help my dad get on this show. I tried to help myself. I don't know why I didn't get on. I don't know. But my dad, so I'm helping my dad with Armin, and we're, legally getting my dad on. So I get my dad selected. And they have the fast finger thing. There's like 10 people. You're on the stage with Regis before you go sit in the podium in the main chair. So I said, Dad, just do everything the way I say, and I just have one rule for you, Pop. You can't involve Donna. Everything she gets into, it's greed, theft. She's a black widow. It's cursed, Pop. You're going to lose. I'll lose. Not that I was stood to make any. I didn't know what my dad was going to make. Probably wouldn't make anything. But I said, let's see. We'll give it a try. God blesses you. It could be like hitting the lottery. I said, that's all you can't do. Well, sure enough, she's involved, and he's got to involve her. Because the show, my father gets selected. He wins. He's going to get called down to New York City. Now, he's in Albany, like 3 hours north of the city, by driving. I'm in L.A. And the show says to my father, part of the rulings, you can bring one person, totally guest complimentary. We'll pay for the flight, we'll pay for the room. And I think you get a $50 food stipend. So I said, well, Pop, it's kind of a no-brainer. You pick me, right? I mean, I got to fly from L.A. I don't, I'll have no place to stay, and I could use the money because nobody's paying me to do this. I'm helping you for free. Who do you think he picks, or she puppets him? I know she puppets him. She had to take control. It's money. She'll be there. She goes. So where she could have just ridden in the car with him for free, stayed in the room with him for free, they don't put me on the thing. I have to pay my own expense to go from L.A. to New York. I have to pay my own food, and I have to pay to get my own hotel room. I can't afford it. I'm like, Dad, I mean, she's going to come with you anyway. She can stay with, it's not you can bring her. She doesn't need to be the free one, get the free ride. But the $50 food stipend, I guess that's what she was, she had to get a check for that. So I said, well, Dad, don't make this worse. Because once we got there, I said, well, Dad, can you please put me up? I'll get a cot. You guys sleep in your bed, whatever. It's cold, Dad. It's New York City. I don't have any place to stay. It's expensive. He said, well, whatever, he said. And then he brings, and I'm not giving all the details to the story, but not that I'm trying to hide them. I'm just don't want to take the time here. So he invites the daughters, Lisa and Amy. I said, that's forget it. We're done. I said, Dad, no her and no Lisa and Amy, or she invited them, because they're going to screw it up for you, Dad. They're evil. They have an evil spirit about them. I did all the work. They're going to try to take control. They're going to screw it up. Sure enough, Amy and Lisa come down. They want to take control of the whole thing. Mark, you're out. We're in charge now. We'll take your father through the rest of this. I go, really? You're all in charge? And as a matter of fact, you can't stay in the hotel room. And they were so disrespectful and so irreverent, so angry. You believe this? I did all of that, and I had to spend the night sleeping outside the hotel like you'd see in a movie, on a hotel grate with the steam coming out, just to try to stay warm. The night before my father goes on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Now, sure enough, he gets in the audience, and she's up standing in one side of the audience, seated there, and I'm in the other, and Regis is down with my father. And I said, Dad, do not look at her. Focus on me. I said, stay prayerful. Pop, you probably won't know the answer to any of these questions, but it's A, B, and C. If you just pray and get the right thing, God will bless you. Well, he's about to do whatever, and Regis walks by, and they're like studio managers, like, quiet on the set. Nobody talk. Nobody say anything. We're about to do it. My father, Donatella, Donna, water, pills. And I said, don't. And sure enough, she does. She's like talking to my father like he's on stage. I'm surprised they didn't just kick him off the set. Of course he bombs and fails. I'm like, Dad, you did everything I told you not to do. Now here's the irony to that story. True story. 2 weeks or 2 months before my father was, went through that process, he goes to the bank because he needs to get a second mortgage on his home because she's going through all the money. So he wants like 250 grand or something from 2 banks. He goes to both banks said, no, Tony, look it. Ever since, they didn't say it this way, but it was pretty obvious. Ever since you've been her, all you do is, lose money. None of your businesses make it. She gets, somebody's getting the money, but it ain't you. It's not you. And, so I know, and it's obvious she's going through all the money, and she steals it, saves it, secrets it away, whatever. Bad business advice, doesn't do her job, that's all. She just uses it for money. So they don't want to give my father the loan. My father had perfect credit his whole life. They don't want to give him the loan. They don't want to give him the second mortgage on his home. He's gonna have to sell a family home, which is another story which I think I mentioned last week. So that's where it stands. And my father, like I said, goes down to New York. Then the show comes on the air, whatever, 2 weeks later, 2 months later, whatever. So my father has to go back to these banks to get the final, determination on the loans. He walks into the first bank, and this is a true story. He walks into the first bank, banker says, no, Tony, I told you, sorry, you can't get the loan. He goes into the second bank, the bank manager, the loan officer, comes up to the mortgage officer, whomever that's called, comes up to the door and greets him, Tony, I saw you on Millionaire. Wow, you must be successful, and wow, that's great. Of course you can have the second mortgage. Sure you can, and I rearranged some paperwork and I did that. So essentially, in a way, my father got $250,000 second mortgage for getting on Millionaire. How much did I get? How many thanks? How many false accusations? Innumerable. How many disrespects and rejections? Countless. But so typical. So typical. All right, let me go through Tony, the car arrest. I mentioned that. My father... Will, life insurance. Well, like I said, according to my father, one of the last conversations he had, he was going to be buried at DeVito Salvador, who buried most of his brothers and sisters from Mechanicville, family friend, a long time. I spoke with the son, knew the father, Tommy, gave them stuff even for my daddy's coffin. But apparently, after my father dies, this funeral, this no wake, just the church, gets out of DeVito Salvador. I was shocked. I'm like, because my father even said, he goes, Mark, even if I'm buried at Lyons Funeral Home, I can have Salvador overlook it. But apparently that gets changed. I know she had to have something to do with it, because my father also told me he left a will. But no will. I've heard nothing of a will. Nothing. Did she change it? Did she alter it? Did she cancel it out? Because I warned her. I said, Dad, he said, Mark, I took Amy and Donna with me to do my will. I said, Dad, they're going to screw you over. They are going to screw you over, Dad. And I'm like, Dad, if you want to leave me a toaster, you better tell me in person, or you better find another way, because I don't care, Dad. I want you to stay alive. But my father begged me for months, Mark, years actually. Father, Mark, got at least the jukebox and slot machine. You can't get them near her. I don't want them going to her family. I don't want them going to her evil sister. She doesn't care. His beloved, he loved that jukebox and slot machine. I even got a storage unit I had to pay for, $90 for months, just to get prepared to hold that thing, and it was money lost because I could never get there. I couldn't. She was policing the whole thing. I went to see my father. She came running in. I said, Dad, I'll be there 1 o'clock. She said at 12:59. Stay out of my effing office. Don't you guys go near my office. No, you can't do this. No, you can't take any of my Nobody's taking any valuables. That was another story. I think I told that story. I said, Dad, I said for a year, I said, Dad, I'll help you with the jukebox and slot machine, but you got to give me the thing I really want, which are the family videotapes. These are your life. These are our life. They're disintegrating. Well, unbeknownst to me, he had let somebody else borrow them just days before. He said, sure, Mark, no problem. I had to record it because I knew what was going to happen. So I went to his house, and when he was living in East Greenbush, she made him move to East Greenbush so she could be closer to her family. My father was just despondent. 50 years in his beautiful home. So I go up, and he says, sure, Mark, here's 3 crates or 2 crates of the videotapes, and I'll even give you the video recorder to duplicate them. I said, all right, Pop, it'll take me, I don't know how long, but I'm up in Boston Spa. Hopefully we can go to the races. But I go to Cracker Barrel. She's on the phone with him. My father's freaking out at the outside Cracker Barrel. The manager came out and said, if you guys don't leave here, I'm going to have you arrested. He's screaming, you're not stealing my belongings. I go, what are you talking about, Pop? Of course, on the phone with her. She's her coercion, her cultish behavior. I go, Pop, I asked you for a year. I got you. We just left your house. They're in the car, Pop. I'm not stealing your video. No, you're stealing my belongings. I'm going to have you arrested. Do you understand? You're going to spend, and there's a recording of this. You're going to spend the summer in jail. You're stealing my belongings. I want my belongings. I go, Dad, you gave me the video VCR. Take it. I don't need it. I'll get them copied some other way. No, you're stealing my, because she is in his ear. And he's freaking out outside of Cracker Barrel. I said, Dad, I came all the way across. For a year I've been wanting to get these videotapes to copy them. I'm just going to copy them, Pop. What do you think I'm going to do with them? I mean, and again, I found out later he lent them to one of his daughters just like a couple weeks earlier, and she copied all of them. But of course, they don't communicate with me, and I don't communicate with them. The whole summer, I didn't get to see my father. And I don't, because, she wouldn't let him come up to the racetrack. And I finally did get most of the tapes recorded. Okay, but of course I got his calls threatening to have me thrown in jail with her in his ear because I knew. Now, how would you like to get that call from your father you haven't seen and you want to go, spend him, take him up to the racetrack and have fun with him? All summer I couldn't see my poor daddy and I hadn't seen him for a year. And then I get the final call. Imagine getting this call. I'm going to sell your grave plot if you don't get back my belongings within like 48 hours. And of course it takes 48 hours of no sleep for me just to get these things recorded. So, I mean, who would think to say that? My father doesn't think that way. They're his grave plots. She would think that. She would ransom them, blackmail, try to sell and profit from them. And of course, I heard she tried to do it with one of the other daughters. Really? Threaten to sell somebody's grave plot? That's how you also want to make money? And then, but the archdiocese, again, now run by a woman, says, well, Mark, they're your fathers, whatever happens, now they're in control. I don't want to get in that whole story. But the moral story is how low, how evil, how ungodly. Really? Profit in a final burial place? Threaten, extort, and blackmail with that? And then she acts all magnanimous because the diocese said she couldn't sell them. So she says, well, I don't want to have any interest in them. You guys can keep them. Really? You mean you couldn't sell them? Evil. All right, let me see what else I got here. Oh, okay. My father dying. So again, the funeral gets this, and she was pretty. That's all I remember. But evil, calling him dad, like funeral directors, I guess their tradition is. But no, he's not your dad. You never met the man. I don't think you did. But even if he's not your dad, you don't say that. It's a lie. You don't say it in church. You don't say it at his funeral. You don't say it at his death. When he's on the cross, hanging there where God's trying to judge where he goes to eternity. You don't call him dad. You don't put lies in his house. And the person standing next to him, a cop. Apparently, they're supposed to be protecting me. Joe arranges for this cop to come there. I mean, I can't get into the whole story again. I'm disallowed from going to my father's own funeral. So the high priestess, this evil pig whore bitch, can rule the roost and tell her story. But Mark's not allowed at the funeral. Really? My own dad's last day. 91 years. And I can't go to his funeral. I can't represent him. I can't get consolation from people there. I can't say hello. I can't say thank you. I can't even criticize anybody because probably that's what they thought I was going to do the whole time. I can't reunite people I haven't seen, worked for my daddy 30 years earlier. I can't do any of that. No, Mark, you're not even allowed. And I'm going to protect you, Mark. We're going to protect you. We're going to have a cop there for your own protection. Really? Evil. How about my dad being protected? He was an abuse victim. He's lying in a coffin, dead, an abuse victim, with a lying funeral director and a cop who's acting all righteous like he stood there. Oh, you'll understand one day. Yeah, I understand. Joseph pulling the strings, Condom or Condor or whatever the cop's name was. I don't mean to be disrespectful. It's not Condom. Constant. Something. And I heard of the guy. I've heard his name before. But apparently, and I mean, it's just evil. So let me get to what I also was going to say about that. Okay, my father's death. Another update, which I think I gave before. So you can click on where I put this link down to the AI report on my Facebook of his being, having this infection. And it says if the infection wasn't paid attention to, it could get really worse to the point of death because you don't have to die from this. You don't have to die from this sepsis, this failure. You don't have to die from this. This is not, and of course they put Alzheimer's down at the bottom. She had to put that on. And of course now it's a female doctor, 28 years old. I think I mentioned this last thing. Joins the wine club. I get the best doctor if he's there. But anyway, so on the report, it's, and the AI says, if this person is an abuser, they could have let the guy languish for who knows how long. They could have caused the infection. They could have hit him. They could have bruised him. I mean, when you're old, you get bruised. It could lead to blood clotting, all sorts of things. So, of course, the ambulance is called, I guess, on Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday night, whenever it's called, emergency. He's dragged in. Now, let me tell you the reason there's neglect. And again, I could have a wrongful death lawsuit from the judge to the state of New York to the judge to the most appropriately his abuser, and then Joseph, and then all the children, every single one of them, who wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for my father and wouldn't be for me, actually. Not so much in the things I've done to protect and honor my father and mother through my life, but the fact that I was born blessed. If I'm not born, if I come out, handicapped like Susan, they stopped because they were going to have more kids, I think, after Susan. But she came out, handicapped with spina bifida, so they stopped. But not, I'm not taking credit for that, obviously. But every one of them, the lessons I taught all of them, all the things I've done for them over the years, turning the other cheek for 30 years. But either way, so, him being neglected, and quite possibly it was a homicidal thing. Again, I'm alleging that. I'm not saying it. I don't have enough proof. I'm working on it. But there seems to be a lot of, what do you call it? Corroborating, a lot of circumstantial things that would lead to that. Threatening with the knives, the broken ribs, the punched in the nose. I mean, odds are, I know spiritually that's what happened. I know that something like that happened. But let me give you an earthly example of how I know. And I think I told this, I don't know if I told this story, but again, it bears repeating. So my father calls me up and he says, Mark, I can't find her. She's on, she went off with some men again, her and her sister. She goes on vacation. She's on vacation again because that's what she did. She'd leave in the morning. She'd be gone all day. At night, she'd volunteer at Proctor's Theater instead of taking care of my dad. She volunteered because my dad said she was just looking for other rich men. She met some rich woman there she was trying to get money off of. Apparently she's got free time to go volunteer at Proctor's Theater, which is like the nicest place in Schenectady, even though it's a lousy little theater in Schenectady. But wouldn't take care of my father. My father begged me, Mark, at least tell Proctor's not to, have her come, do something. I need help. But no, that's not important to her. Just totally neglecting my father. So he calls me up and he's alarmed. Literally, pun intended, because I hear this loud, annoying fire alarm going off. I go, Dad, where are you? He goes, I'm in the house. I can't turn this fire alarm off. He goes, I can't reach it. It's loud. It's annoying, and I can hear it. He goes, I can't find her. She's on vacation. She's not returning my call. She's out with one of her man friends, with her and her sister. I what am I supposed to do? I can't turn it off. I said, well, Dad, my father always said, he said, Mark, don't say go, say. So I love you, Dad. God bless. I pray you're in heaven. So I said, well, Dad, I got another thought. Get out of the house. Maybe the fire alarm is real, Dad. Because he said, Mark, I'm looking around. I can't find I can't turn the alarm off. I said, Dad, well, first of all, you either look for the fire or get out. Get out of the house, Dad. Don't worry about them. What if the alarm is real? So, he was like, well, Mark, you're right. I can't. But she's got me so confused, so beaten up, so discombobulated. I didn't even think to get out of the house. I said, well, yeah, Dad, come on. I love you. I love you. I'll do anything to save your life. So he gets out of the house. I said, well, let me call the fire department. God is my witness again. I call the fire department. It's a Friday. I'm pretty sure it was Friday. And the fire department, I get an answering machine. This is your Schenectady fire department. We're not here to take the call right now. We'll be back in the station on Monday. Please leave a message until then. It's the fire department. I go, are you kidding? I said, Dad, I'll call the police. I'll have the police call the fire department, figure it out. I call the police. God is my witness. Police guy answers. Who's this? What's the address? Where's it about? Oh, you mean DiBello? I said, Mark DiBello, calling for my father. There's an alarm. It might be a fire at his house. Can you please call I tell the story. Police guy said, police answer, dispatcher, whatever. I think it was a guy. It wasn't a woman. I'll say that much. He says, oh, is this DiBello? The guy who called like 3 times over the last 3 years saying his father was getting beaten up? Is this another false wolf, cry wolf, false alarm? Well, what are you talking about? The alarm's going off. Oh, yeah, we know, whatever, fine. This is the cop talking to me. He said, all right, we'll look into it. We'll send somebody. Because I had another story in relation to that I won't share now. So the police go over, or the cops, or the fire department. Fire department, I think it was, actually. So my father's safe. There's no fire. The alarm went off I said, Dad, tell me what happened. Put the fire guy on the phone. The alarm went off because it was not maintained. It was so full of dust and dirt and debris from her not maintaining it that I guess that clogging it, the alarm must have misread it maybe for smoke, and the alarm went off. So the alarm, my father isn't even safe in that house. That's the neglect, the lack of care this person's giving. Now you might say, oh, geez, it's a blessing in disguise, right? The false alarm went off. I mean, if there's smoke, the alarm, probably would have detected it. No, if the alarm's all crowded, whatever like this, it wouldn't detect smoke. Or what if it got so clogged and it went off when he wasn't there, and maybe he's out of town or something, or he's in Florida for 2 weeks and the batteries run dead. Now that alarm doesn't work and it's completely clogged and there's no battery in it. My father goes home, he's left alone, and the house is burning. He hears no alarm. He burns to death. Total neglect, total abuse, period. End of story. Just that story alone. My father shouldn't have stayed, was better off not staying there. She wasn't giving him care. She was caring for his money so she could get more when he was gone. That's what she cared about. And these people, these betrayers, these children of his, saying, oh, she took great care of him. Yeah, for $2 million, didn't take care of him, not only neglected him, abused him, and used him, and then had his son thrown in jail repeatedly. That's a godly, good person. That's the person you want to trust with your father's life? You don't think there's something nefarious in his death? So trying to get to the bottom of it, like I said, I'm working on it. I try to do other things to keep my mind preoccupied so I don't have to be angry and depressed. I try to be, I have nothing more important than my daddy, but try to deal with a government that wants a person crucified. Try to deal with a Pontius Pilate, with betrayers, 7 other Judases, an extended family who could care less about my beautiful daddy, who should still be alive today, and this person roaming free instead of being in jail where they belong, like my father said, so she doesn't do it to somebody else. And I witness and I show my compassion and godliness. But no, this person does belong in jail, not me. Let me see what else I have here. I mentioned the over phone calls, the liars, Joey, credit racing. I mentioned that. The cop at the funeral. I think I mentioned everything, at least on this list. All right, so I'm sorry the message went over. I don't know who's watching. I just want it on record. I don't have my daddy. He was my God on this earth in a good way. I don't really have, I've got a couple people I can call friends. I have my people, some on Facebook, but not too many. I do my work. I still try to preach. I still try to serve God. I still pray I get to see my daddy and mommy. I pray they're in heaven. I told you I saw my daddy twice after he died. He came to me in a vision, in a dream, but it wasn't like a dream. Like I said, if my dreams are 2D, he was in 3D. Colored versus black and white. I gave an analogy in one of these first messages. I never had a dream like that. He said, earliest son, I got to go. I'm dead. Couldn't stay alive. Couldn't stay around. I told you some of his last words to me. Mark, there's no love in this house, only her love of money. That was 1. 2, Aurelius, tell my story and don't let her get away with it. And how his own children betrayed him. And betrayed me. They don't care about me. They cared less about me than they ever cared about my daddy, which I understand. That's kind of natural. But to the point of, no, Mark, jail, homeless, broke, dead, no problem. All for trying to save the life of my father and let him be alive. And not only for, admitted my personal gain because I loved him. I just love him. I loved him with being with him. I didn't know money. In 35 years, my dad gave me $500, I think. And that $500 from the sale of the house that I had to use, $1,000 from the sale of the house that I had to use to get my stuff out of the house, and then $400, which I paid him back, that she sent to me because he wanted me to come rescue him. He said, Mark, she's beating me senseless. You got to come save me. And I paid him back the $400 when I got there. Other than that, I sent my father, like I said, probably sent $10,000 to him in the last 2-3 years of his life. A life savings, the rest of my life savings, storage, airfares he never got on 3 times. But again, I got this written document, Will. I'm trying to follow up with that. Maybe a lawyer will help. If somebody knows a lawyer, please help me. The criminal charges against her. My freedom, that's number 1. My peace of mind, my freedom. I don't deserve this. I told my dad I would suffer with him in the foxhole for as long as I could, but I don't deserve this anymore. He's gone, and everybody's either abandoned or betrayed me. Just about everybody, including family and friends, people that like one of my aunts who was like very close to me, no longer. So that's basically number one. Number two is she belongs in jail. There needs to be justice. No justice, no peace. She needs to be punished for or rehabilitated, which I fought for years, but no, punished now. Not killed, not beaten senseless like she beat my daddy, but jailed. Not vengeance, revenge, but retaliation, just reciprocation, if you want to call it that, I guess. And then lastly, maybe a belonging of my daddy's, something, his jukebox, his slot machine, something, a few dollars to eat and pay rent, pay the electricity, or something like his hat, something, some memorabilia, something beloved that I know. You think my daddy wanted to die and leave me with nothing? No. And then all this life insurance, this is the other category above, that I previously mentioned. All this life insurance she's profiting from. Can't they take that back or rescind that or, find judgment? I mean, it's obvious the man was neglected and abused for money, and she lied and said he left no life insurance. That's a lie. Isn't it criminal? Isn't it fraud? You make a statement like that, and then all you did was use and abuse the man and didn't care for him so you could profit. And all of them are responsible in one way or another. All of them. So again, prayerfully, maybe I can get something done. Maybe the government changes a little bit. Thank God Biden isn't in there. Because, like I said, you find a weak man and the women who want to be empowered. I already mentioned those three politically. But these women who wanted to rule my father's life, who thought, oh, we love him, we can baby him. These women are not good mothers. None of his daughters are good mothers. They may act like it and think it. But if you don't honor your father and you can't save your father's life, and he was an easy life to save. It wasn't hard to save him in a sense. He wasn't hard to take care of. He didn't need much. He just wanted to be away from her.